Welcome to Talks at Google. My name is Charlene Wang, and I'm a product manager at Nest. I'm so excited to moderate today's session with Tiago Forte. Tiago Forte is the best-selling author of Building a Second Brain. He's one of the world's foremost experts on productivity. He has taught thousands of people around the world how timeless principles and the latest technology can revolutionize their productivity, creativity, and personal effectiveness. Tiago, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Happy to be here.
Yeah, can you tell us your story? How did it all get started?
Absolutely. I'd love to. So, to understand what I mean, what I'm talking about when I say a second brain, it's quite a lofty claim. And also to understand what I have to offer, why you might want to build a second brain, you have to know a bit about my story. It starts in 2007. I was 22 years old, undergrad at San Diego State University. And life was really good. Life was very simple, very straightforward. I was studying business. I was having the time of my life. I had nothing but hope and optimism for my future. I had an obsession, which was with computers. I worked at the time at the Apple Store, Fashion Valley in San Diego. At the time, one of the 5 biggest Apple stores in the world. This photo is from June 2007. Does anyone remember what happened in June 2007? It was the launch of the iPhone. You remember? Were you around? This photo was actually, that's me in the bottom right, was taken on launch day right outside our store as we welcomed customers to buy the very first iPhone. And this photo actually made it to the homepage of Apple for a few days. This is my claim to fame. And I was having the time of my life, as I said, until around that same time, the summer of 2007, I started feeling a pain and tension in my throat, in my neck. It started off as just like a little tickle, barely noticeable. I ignored it, thought, it's probably a cold, it'll go away on its own. It didn't go away. The tickle became a scratch, the scratch became an itch, the itch became serious pain and almost unbearable tension. I would wake up in the morning, most mornings, and feel like there was a vice gripping me by the throat. Made it hard to speak, made it hard to sing or laugh. Over the months and eventually years that this continued to deteriorate, I started, my ability to communicate, my ability to connect with other people slowly constricted as my voice condition got worse and worse. Eventually, I started seeing doctors, and then more doctors, and then more doctors. Eventually, I saw over a dozen different specialists, all of them trying to find the cause, much less the solution to what I was feeling, and none of them could. I did every test and scan and diagnostic you can imagine over years. None of them could find even a clue as to what it might be. Finally, after years of this, they gave me, a neurologist actually gave me a last resort. He said, look, we can't find the cause, but if you take this pill, the pain will largely go away. It was a powerful anti-seizure medication called carbamazepine, usually used to treat schizophrenia. And what carbamazepine does is it basically numbs your entire nervous system from head to toe. It's like the off switch to your nervous system. And I took it. I took it without hesitation because I was desperate. I went through my days as if the way that I felt day to day was as if I was drunk. It was the feeling of being drunk every day that I took this pill. Those were the first side effects, but later on, I would eventually discover there was an even worse side effect that I wasn't even warned about. One that would come to shape my life, my career, and ultimately my business and the work that I do today. And that side effect was severe short-term memory loss. I started to realize that this medication was wiping my short-term memory as if it never happened. Books I read, conversations I had, relationships, trips I took were gone as if they had never happened. I remember one day turning to my friend Allison. We were serving in the Peace Corps in Eastern Ukraine at the time. And I turned to her and said, Allison, we should go visit Russia. We should visit Moscow. And she turned to me in shock and said, Tiago, we just visited Moscow just a few months ago. Don't you remember? And I didn't. I didn't remember anything. Seeing these photos, which prove that I was there, it was like, it felt vaguely familiar, but it was like looking at someone else's memories of someone else's life. So I was ultimately faced with a choice. Every day, what would you choose if you had to decide between being pain-free on one hand or having access to your memory on the other? Now, I'm going to tell you how the story ended up a bit later on. Don't worry, there will be a resolution. But there was a couple things that I took away from this experience that I really value. One was that I realized that memory is everything. Memory is everything. Your past, the experiences that shaped you, the realizations you've had, the relationships you've had, the stories, the story of your life. That's who you are. Without your memory, you're someone else. I became so committed to preserving the memories of what had happened in my life. As I started my career around the same time in my mid-20s, I realized something else, which is the life that I wanted to lead, my ambitions, my goals, the family I wanted to have, the business I one day wanted to start, those I could not rely on my biological mind and my biological body to give me those things. I actually feel grateful years later now that I learned this so early on. I didn't have the option of powering through, working all-nighters, working through the weekend, trying to remember more, trying to make results happen in my career through brute force. My body just wouldn't allow it. I had to learn from such an early age to depend on external systems of support when my brain, when my memory failed me. Now, think about your own life for a sec. Let's bring this back to the modern age. We live in this time of information overload. There's too much, isn't there? Too much information, too many details, too many facts, too much research, too many emails, too many to-dos, too many messages, too many things from all sides. And I think in a way, my experience gave me a window into the future. It gave me a window into the future that we are all now living, where our brains simply cannot keep up. It's not a question of just being productive or having the right, computer setup or whatever. It is reaching a biological breaking point, is what I believe. I hear constantly from my students, my customers, my clients about indecision and the problem of distraction and the stress and the anxiety and this feeling of procrastination. I think they have a common cause. I think there's this underlying pervasive phenomenon that the information we have to deal with has become inhuman. It's far exceeded our capacity as human beings to manage. Okay. Now, this is kind of uncontroversial at this point. We've been hearing about information overload for 20 years. And yet, there's things we want to accomplish, isn't there? Right? Isn't there things that you want to build and create and achieve, impacts you want to have, change you want to make from your personal life to your family, to your community, to your company, to the world? What do we do in the face of this overwhelming burden on our brain when we have things that we want to we want to accomplish in our lives. As I was experiencing my condition, I started to research, and I discovered there's an entire field, there's an entire scientific field called extended cognition. Okay, extended cognition. It's only been around 20 years or so. And one of the best places to learn more about it is a book called The Extended Mind by Annie Murphy Paul, who I know has done a Google Talk in the past. Highly recommend her book. But as I started to research extended cognition, I was introduced to a tremendous possibility by a study on monkeys. Okay, I cite this study in my book. But what they found, the researchers, is that they had monkeys, in this case, use a tool like a rake to reach for an object that they couldn't reach otherwise. So the monkeys were using like a small rake to reach for something and pull it toward them. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. But when they scanned those monkeys' brains, they found something really unusual and extraordinary was happening in their brains, which was the part of the monkey's brain that is responsible for mapping the boundaries of the body, right? Where does the body begin and end? That part of the brain remapped the map of the body to incorporate the new tool. Do you get the implications of this? From the perspective of the monkey's brain, that rake was just as much a part of its body as its own hand, as its own limbs. Okay? This is kind of the main finding of extended cognition, that not only can our minds remap how they operate to include external tools, we're doing that all day long. There's nothing more natural for us than incorporating tools and objects in our environment into our cognition. Now think about your phone. What does this mean for our phones? This device that you carry with you everywhere you go and depend on for practically everything. Okay? I think it's pretty clear that our smartphones have become a part of our cognition, that they're just as much a part of our cognition as our own body. Have you ever lost your phone? That feeling of total panic, I think, is a good indication that your body treats that as part of itself, right? Another example, have you ever gone to Google something and you realize you don't have internet? And it's like, oh, this interruption, like, oh, a part of my extended mind that I thought was there, that I depend on and always expect to be available, isn't there. It's jarring. It's disturbing. So there's a way of thinking of our technology as prosthetic devices. Okay, not just things, but these prosthetic equipment, prosthetic devices that gets added onto ourselves and not just makes up for where we're weak, but actually extends our capabilities, right? Prosthetic devices might seem kind of obscure, but you're wearing several of them right now. How many of you are wearing glasses or contacts? Those are prosthetic devices to enhance your sight. How many of you are wearing shoes? Prosthetic devices to enhance your feet. How many of you are wearing a watch? A prosthetic device to enhance your perception of time. Okay. We're trying to live these complex modern lives with a brain that is 200,000 years old. We're trying to run a complex modern life with cognitive hardware that is 200,000 years old. I think it's time, it's well past time for us to have a prosthetic device for the mind. We have prosthetic devices for every other part of the body. What about the most important one, the brain? Now, when I say a prosthetic device for the mind, when I say a second brain, people think of something very technological, very advanced and sophisticated and futuristic, basically science fiction. And this is coming. I mean, this is definitely coming. One day we will have an actual, brain implant, I'm sure, that just plugs right in. But in the meantime, for the problems that we're facing now, today, what I mean is something so simple and so mundane. I'm talking about notes. Notes, note taking, this thing that's existed for hundreds, even thousands of years. This habit that you probably already do all the time that requires no special skill besides reading and writing and no special technology except paper or software, the software that we already have today. So the question that my career, my business is dedicated to answering is this one. What would it look like to reinvent the ancient, timeless practice of note-taking for our modern Connect age? This is the question that a second brain answers. Supercharging note-taking, enhancing it, making it something far more powerful than just some scribbles on a piece of paper that you do one time, but a lifelong practice of learning and creating and producing. And I have some more to say on that, but I'd love to talk to you, Charlene, about what you'd like to dive into next.
Yeah, Tiago, thank you so much for sharing the story. And for anyone tuning in, if there's any question you have for Tiago, please drop in the YouTube chat and we'll get to it. But first, Tiago, what's the second brain?
Yes, so a second brain is a trusted place outside of your brain, a trusted tool where you save for the long term the information that matters most to you. The information that you want to revisit, you want to reflect on, that is personal to you, unique to you, whether it's on paper or on a piece of software. It is a lifelong record and archive of your learnings, your discoveries, your research, not just for one test or to write one paper or even to do one project, but for years, for a lifetime of learning and growth. That is the definition of a second brain. I personally like to do it in software, in a second brain app, which we can talk more about. But that is what a second brain is.
Wonderful. And we'll have you show us a little bit more in a bit. But before that, can you tell us how can second brain make us more effective at work?
Yes. So I'm really focused on the needs of professionals. There are ways of using a second brain across your health and your personal life, your friendships, your hobbies. I think the highest leverage place is really in your career or your business. And the way I think of it is just think about anytime you do valuable thinking, right? Isn't this, as knowledge workers, what we're doing most of the time? We're making brainstorms, we're doing research, we're making decisions, we're evaluating different options. Those things are hard, right? It's really hard to take in information, make sense of it, and then have some sort of result or decision or outcome. If you invest your most precious resource, which in my opinion is your attention, right, which is so limited and becoming even more limited every day, if you invest it one time, there's no reason to just throw away the results of that thinking at the end of the day or the end of the week. Keep the results of that thinking. Keep the notes, the brainstorms, the bullet points, the action steps. Keep them in your second brain. So the next time you're in a meeting like that one, or you're trying to solve a problem like that one, or you're in a similar situation, you can just revisit your best thinking so you don't have to do it again. What that does over time, it's just like investing. The compounding effect of investing in your knowledge over time is you free yourself up from more basic, kind of simpler, more like repetitive uses for your own brain, and frees up your time and bandwidth to solve more interesting, more exciting, more unusual, more complex problems over time.
I can't wait to see your brain, your second brain. Can you show us how you and your team use it?
Absolutely. So, like I said, this is the most kind of mundane, everyday tool. It's notes. I keep my second brain in a software program called Evernote. Evernote is kind of the OG of this space. They were the first company to market themselves as a second brain. And you can use really any software you want. You can use Google Keep. Many of you are probably using that. You can use Microsoft OneNote, Apple Notes. There's a whole new kind of wave of second brain apps like Notion, like Obsidian, like Roam. You can take your pick. But I've been using Evernote for about 10 years. And if you look at my kind of note-taking app, it's very straightforward. Over here on the left, I have folders, which in Evernote are called notebooks, which correspond to my different projects. You can see this talk right here. I have the notes right there in that folder. I also have, events that I'm speaking at, roles that I'm hiring for, products I'm creating, pieces of writing that I'm doing, my taxes, all my active projects, all the information related to them is right there. I have areas of responsibility, which are other aspects of my life, such as cooking, finances, health, different aspects of my business, finance, legal, content, marketing. And then finally down here, I have everything else I'm interested in: culture, design, the economy, languages, marketing, music, overlanding, philosophy. Okay. And so inside each of these folders are just simple notes. A note, when I say note, I really just mean a simple document with text, some combination of text, images, links, attachments that I want to reference in the future. So you can see here I have 7,000 notes, which I know is kind of insane. That is what you get when you've been doing this for 10 years. The interesting thing is, if you actually do the calculation, on average, that's 2 notes per day that I take. 2 notes per day. And a note, I mean, this one you see on the screen here is my highlights from a book called The Whole Brain Child, which is a book that I'm reading right now. But a note can be short. In fact, most of them are probably 30 to 50 words, a few bullet points, a sentence, a quote, some ideas that I have in a meeting. They're short. Okay. And if you're wondering, what do these notes contain? I'll just show you a few examples. These are my highlights from an ebook that I'm reading on the Kindle called The Whole Brain Child. We have a 2-year-old, and so I'm very interested in how the brains of children develop. And by the way, these highlights are imported automatically using a service called Readwise. So I don't have to export, I don't have to, sync. They just appear here as soon as I make the highlight. I have things like this is a Google Sheet that a friend of mine sent out in his email newsletter with, I think it's like the most important books in history. He put into a spreadsheet, the most important books sorted by date of when they were written, which is one of those things. Like, I don't know how I'm going to use that. I don't even know if I'm going to read any books from that list, but it's something that I want to keep for the future. It's something that I won't necessarily be able to find in the future. I have things like an outline for a YouTube video that I'm going to be creating. I have things like, a few notes from my discussions with my team about a role and a job description that we're going to be hiring for, right? Think about something like this. These are just a handful of bullet points from 2 phone calls that I've had with my team, right? Trivial from a technology perspective. It's like 50 words. And yet, to remember this with my first brain would be impossible. A week from today, if you ask me, what did you talk about in those 2 phone calls? I don't know. I have no clue. So we're basically using technology and software to do easily what the first biological brain is so terrible at, which is remembering details. And that's my second brain.
We got a few audience questions. Folks have been asking as the demo goes on. And one of them from Emma is, if you record all your brainstorming, do you end up with so much info in the second brain that it's hard to find what you need later? How do you balance knowing what's worth recording?
This is the whole thing. This is the whole question. So, okay. In the past, the difficult part of note taking was capturing, right? Think about how hard it was. Even just 20, 30 years ago, find a piece of paper, turn to the right place, find a pen, write it down, hope that somehow you'll find it in the future. No way to search, no real way to edit what you've written down. It was full of friction. That's completely changed. Now capturing is so easy. It can be as simple as hitting bookmark on a web page. Like I said, you can use integration services like Readwise that automate it for you. So now I'm not even doing anything and notes are just appearing in my second brain without any further effort on my part. So basically the bottleneck on note taking moves. It moves from the initial capture, which has now become trivial, and it moves to the subsequent steps. And that's what my book is about. I have 4 steps, which follow the acronym CODE, C-O-D-E. The C is capture, that's the first one. But then the subsequent steps are O for organize, D for distill, and E for express. And we can talk more about those, but basically, yeah, it's now up to us to filter, to distill down that big quantity of notes to a small, viable amount that we can actually interact with and we can actually review. I find, last thing I'll say is, often when people discover, digital note taking, they go a little crazy and they just start capturing and saving everything. They start hoarding, right? It's kind of like it, if you were on a shopping spree and everything in the store was free. At first, you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, let me just take everything." But then your house is full of stuff and you can't even walk through the house and you realize, "Oh, wait a minute. I need to actually get rid of things." And the same thing happens in the digital world. You get past that phase of hoarding, and then the whole idea is that you want to be more succinct, more picky and selective about what you keep, to the point that today I note down 2 things per day. A handful of bullet points in a day is all that I do, maybe 5 minutes of note taking in a day. But it does take some time to get there.
2 things per day is a very high threshold. I think in your book, you also mentioned don't highlight over 10% in
Sorry.
Kindle, right? Or they don't let you do that.
Yeah. It's funny because in the past, we had a scarcity of information. So we have all these assumptions from the past, such as more information is better. Who said, right? Or this assumption that the information that's really valuable must be out there somewhere and not the information that I already have, right? This is like the consumerist mindset of more is better, more consumption, more accumulation. That it's like with consumerism, we've started to realize, wait a minute, there should be some limits on our consumption of goods and services, right? But in the digital world, we still operate under those assumptions. More is better, endless accumulation. And so it's like all my tricks and my habits and my strategies are mostly about limiting, trying to get myself to be more selective and picky and to capture less.
And we have another question on the note of capturing. Let's pop them up. So from Dave, keeping notes seems easier when sitting at my computer. Do you also take breaks to hop on your phone and record notes while socializing or otherwise engaged, especially now after or during the post-pandemic world, and something more active?
Oh, absolutely. The mobile functionality is critical. I think both as a society and on the individual level, over time, more of your notes will be taken on the go, right? They'll be taken in the moment. You just stepped out of the shower because you had a good idea in the shower. For some reason, shower thoughts are a thing. Or you take them when you arrive somewhere from driving, or you take them, in the middle of a meeting, or you take them somewhere that you're not just sitting there at your computer. And then in general, mobile usage is increasing as a percentage of the time that we spend on our devices. This is why I think one of the few like key criteria of a Second Brain app is that it has a seamless, quick, frictionless mobile app. Absolutely.
And since we talked a little bit about capture here, can you tell us more about what code stands for and how can people use that in life?
Yes. So let's talk about code. Um, so when we talk about a second brain, people think about a thing. They think about this object, this system, this mechanical thing called a second brain. And it is a thing. It is a system. But I think more importantly, it's a set of behaviors, right? It's a set of habits. It's how you work with software that leads to a second brain, not having a particular, app that is, looks a particular way. So the best way to build a second brain, honestly, is to use the information that you're already consuming, that you're already encountering every single day, use it more effectively, use it more intentionally, use it more systematically. So code is a workflow. It is actually it's like a factory. It's like a production line. It's directional. There's a beginning, middle, and end. Things come in as they get captured, then they get organized, then they get distilled, and then the last step, the E, is express. Which, if you're wondering, like, what is the point of all this? Like, what really justifies this effort? It's expression. It's self-expression, to communicate more effectively, tell your story, spread your message, persuade the people around you, to spread an idea, in a way that is more powerful. And so I don't know. Do you want to get into? We can really get into each letter of code, but it's basically encouraging you not to just store things. Like you can just throw things in a digital filing cabinet and forget about them. But what
Yeah.
is actually matters in all this is moving your ideas and your projects and your goals forward from capture all the way to sharing and expression.
Can you show us one example?
Yeah. Actually, yes. Can I show my screen again?
Yes.
So this example just came to mind. So notice that I just did a quick search for Happy Sleeper, which is the only thing I remember is a couple of words from the title of this book, which I read back in March. Okay, you can see right here. So this is an example. I just read a book, not exactly revolutionary. And I read a book on something that I was facing in my life, which was our infant son was not sleeping. Okay, I had a real use case. This isn't just abstract research. We can't sleep. My wife and I are suffering because this kid is waking up multiple times a night. I have a problem and I need a solution. Okay, so I read the book. I think I read it in like 3 or 4 days. I was very desperate. And you can see here, every time I kept a highlight, you can see the location in the ebook right there. It got saved to this note. So you can see this is a very long note. This is one of the longest notes that I will ever take, right? That's capture. For organize, I simply got this note and I moved it. I actually had a project called Caillou, who's our son's name, Caillou's sleep plan. Right? I had a concrete project. I'm not just going to read stuff. I'm going to make a plan to help him sleep. So organizing was as simple as getting this note. Oh, actually, you can see the project right here, Caillou's sleep training. Okay. So all I did was get this note and move it from the inbox, which is where notes appear when I first take them. And in one action, moved it to the Caillou's sleep training project folder. That's it. That was organize. One 10-second action. Okay. Then is distill, the D. And all distilling means is to highlight, or in this case, bold, the key points. Right? This note is probably thousands of words, I'm guessing. Yeah, it's 11,000 words. This is a book unto itself. Okay, I can't work with 11,000 words. I can't make sense of 11,000 words. So I went through and I highlighted the key points specifically that I thought we could use, right? So I was looking for things like the correct age, right? There's advice they had when he's like 2 or 3, but we weren't ready for that. There was advice when he was 2 or 3 weeks that was already, we were already past that. So I highlighted not just in general, but specifically the points that would allow me to solve the problem that I had. And then finally, expression, right? You might think, okay, this is just a personal problem you have. But I knew that this needed to take a form that in the middle of the night at 3 in the morning in the dark, I could look at one piece of paper. Actually, it needed to be on paper because I wasn't gonna, take out my phone, my tablet, and blind us all with this, artificial light. And so I distilled just the points you see in bold here into a one-page sleep plan that we tacked right to the wall outside Caillou's bedroom door. That was expression. So this is what you got to get. Expression can be writing a blog post. And actually, I think I did eventually write a blog post on this because so many people that I know had trouble with their infant sleeping. So I actually did make it public. But you don't have to. It doesn't have to be like, you're an online independent creator. Expression is just making something. It's making some concrete artifact that then becomes the solution to the problem that you're facing. So that's one little case study of how I use code in my personal life.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure everyone has a friend or family member they want to share, and this is a really helpful example. So I'm going to take a question from Mike. So Mike has this question. How do you mentally encode information while you're recording to it efficiently preserve context? My first brain connects memories with context in which the information applies, which seems important.
Yes, it's a great question. So a couple things. So, okay, short answer is preserve the context. You can save as much of the context or as little as you think is necessary. Also, save the source. The source, whether it is an actual hyperlink or even just the name of the book or the MLA citation or even just the author's name, some clue where this thing came from is essential. Because the truth is, context matters, but often you don't know what context matters, right? Like, yeah, you might want to go back to the source and find some details. Where did this come from? What are the subtleties? What are the extra considerations? What are the exceptions? But you can't know up front what those are. So I prefer to just extract just the part that I need, save the source citation, and if I want to know more context, I just go back and visit the source. But then there's a more subtle answer, which is, who says the original context is the right context? Right? It's like when I read a book. A book is the author's opinion about what they think is important. And obviously, everything in that book they think is very important, otherwise it wouldn't be in the book. But who says that's correct? Right? Like, this is where note-taking enters the realm of art, of artistry, of creativity. Is, maybe there's an idea from gardening on, how to grow organic plants that you pluck out of that context and put into online marketing on how to organically grow your followers, right? So much of innovation is this sort of cross-pollination. And to do cross-pollination effectively, you have to treat context a little bit loosely. So last thing I'll say is, part of the reason we're keeping everything in a centralized place in your second brain is so it can mix and match and melt together. You see very different ideas from very different fields juxtaposed and stacked on top of other ideas. Sometimes the most random combination of things that appears together ends up being an incredible breakthrough for, something that you're trying to do. So that's what I would say about the question of context.
And also, that's why the final step is express, right? Because when they all come together, you can create something you couldn't think of before.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Your expression it always comes from somewhere. Originality is a myth. No one's ever had an original idea. It's not a thing, right? Everything that we come up with is a recombination or a remix of things that came before. And so to do remixes, you got to give yourself a little permission. Cite your sources. Sometimes people think this means you're stealing people's ideas. No, in fact, I can cite my sources very thoroughly because I have a second brain. Like, one of the ancestors of a second brain is what's called citation management. You look at tools like Mendeley or Zotero, where you very rigorously track every little bit of research. That's what we're doing. Is we care so much about citing where things came from that we're documenting it in a piece of software.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then I'm going to take the next question from Misha. Externalizing my personal private thoughts comes with anxiety for me. What if someone else reads this? Would they think that poorly of me? Do others have similar fears? I feel that it limits me.
Yeah, it's it's funny because we're talking a lot about sort of engineering terms. This is a very kind of left brain, analytical, rational, logical approach to information, which I kind of enjoy. But this pops up in my book, in the course that I teach. It's like, as soon as you start entering this arena of building a second brain, it very quickly becomes a personal growth experience. Because what limits you, the constraints you face, the challenges you face as you go about this, they're not rational challenges. They're emotional ones. Yeah, absolutely. You'll experience all kinds of anxiety, fears around, around privacy, around security, fears around, putting your own ideas out there, fears around people criticizing you for, for being too nerdy about this or being too fastidious. You're going to encounter all sorts of limiting beliefs about whether your ideas actually matter. Like, does your story matter? Does your message even matter? You're going to encounter life scripts like, oh, this is for scientists and researchers, but you're just a product manager. Why do you need to create a system of knowledge management? And you have to push back against all those things, or go through them, or go around them, because it does matter. I really think every single person's story matters. Every single person's ideas matters. But you have to stand up for yourself. You have to be the one to go through the personal growth challenges and just realize your potential. I mean, that's what it ultimately comes back to.
Yeah, I think all productivity became personal growth experiments, and you couldn't separate them from each other.
You can't. You really can't.
We have a question around how to apply the second brain further. So let's take this from Will. Do you have any examples or tips for applying building a second brain to learning new technical skills? There is a lot of new information, but it's mostly reference material.
Yeah, I mean, I do. Any kind of skill. Although one of my biggest influences, honestly, was I spent about 7, 8 years working in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. And a big inspiration for all this was looking at software engineers. I worked at a couple different places, either directly with software engineers or kind of just near them. Got to know them, heard about the nature of their work. And software engineers are just like 5 years ahead of everyone on this, right? They understand snippets, like code snippets. They understand, going on Stack Overflow and just finding a piece of code that solves a problem rather than trying to like figure it out from scratch. They understand wikis and knowledge bases. They understand the importance of documentation, right? When I talk to software engineers, they're like, okay, what's the big deal? We've been doing this for years. I'm just getting that mentality and that mindset and kind of introducing it to everyone else. I think it's a core part of learning technical skills. In fact, I don't think you can learn technical skills without documentation and reference of some kind along these lines. I mean, I could say more, but any kind of skill you're learning that requires ingesting information, making sense of it, structuring it is going to benefit from a place that you can do that, not in your brain, right? As long as it's in here, it's vague, it's ambiguous, it's hard to really see objectively, it's hard to improve. But once it's been externalized, you can do all those things. You can iterate, you can innovate, you can advance it, and even use the ideas and contributions of others, none of which you can do as long as it stays up here.
100%. And this backs to the next question, which is, what is the smallest, easiest step everyone can take to build their second brain?
Yeah, you know what I have on my YouTube channel I think one of our most popular videos, which is to do a 30-day experiment. Okay, don't even take my word for it that you're gonna like this, that you're gonna be into it, right? I'm not one of the, I'm not saying that a second brain is the universal solution to all problems for all people. No. It's for people who probably have a certain personality, certain temperament. It's the nerds among us. It's people who have to manage and make sense of large volumes of information. It's for people who work on computers a lot, right? So just give it a 30-day trial. And what you want to do is find the default built-in Notes app on your phone. Okay, Apple Notes, Google Keep, whatever your operating system offers. Don't even get into the insanity of like the whole market for second brain apps, which people can spend many months kind of in indecision trying to find which app. Just use your built-in one, and just try taking one note a day. Okay, many people already use these notes apps and probably already do this, but just try. What you might need to do is expand your definition of note taking to not just like your grocery list or like your to-do list for the day. That's a good starting point. But take one note a day with an evergreen idea, like a theory, a framework, a quote, an approach, a framing, a paradigm that you hear or listen to or see or read during your day. And I'm sure there's probably dozens of things that you encounter every day that qualify, right? Save one thing that is evergreen that could be useful for the long term. And at the end of 30 days, you'll have 30 evergreen building blocks, 30 knowledge assets. Look at this group of at least 30 knowledge assets and just start to think, how can I leverage these? How can I reuse them? How could I synthesize them, combine them almost like Legos to solve a problem that I'm facing, to answer a question I'm trying to answer, to create some kind of leverage in my life so I don't have to keep doing the thinking that went into those again and again and again and again, right? Free up your time using those building blocks that you've already created. And if you enjoy that, you find value in it, then just keep the experiment going. Maybe you might want to go from 1 note a day to 2 notes a day, which is my long-term average, right? But think about what this means over the course of a year. What if you ended the next year that is already going to pass, that is going to pass anyway, that you're going to do everything that you're still going to do anyway, but instead you have what? 700 something notes, 700 something knowledge building blocks after a year of your life. That's a priceless asset. You can't even calculate what that is worth.
Thanks for sharing that 30-day challenge. I think we all have something to look forward to for the next month. Let's pop the next question up. So Juliana has this question. I'm curious how often you go back and take a look at the data from your second brain.
Yes, this is a common one, is basically retrieval, right? It's easy to get stuff in, organizing and distilling, even expressing. We kind of know what that looks like. But the moment that you go back to find something is a key moment, right? So a couple things I'll say. First of all, the key here is really search. Search, much the same technology that Google uses for its search engine. Search is just incredible. It blows my mind every day. You can if you can remember 1 or 2 words from a note, and often that's all I can remember. I search in Evernote and it comes up. I can find it probably with 90+% accuracy. A lot of software is now starting to introduce things like fuzzy search, right? Like even if you only approximately remember the term, it will find kind of similar or related words, or it will ignore typos, right? So search is really the most powerful thing. This is why the organizational methods that I recommend don't have to be very rigorous or very precise. Is search solves like 90% of retrieval problems, and then the folders and folder hierarchy are just for like the last 10%. But here's the other thing I'll say is often people think that they need some kind of review process. Like, I don't know where this comes from. They think, oh, once a week I'm going to spend, an hour just going back through and reviewing my notes. I think it comes from the legacy of like this idea that we think we have to memorize things, right? Like spaced repetition is a memorization technique. If you think you have to keep things up here, then yes, you better be reviewing every day, every week, every month, and you can never stop. But the whole point of a second brain is that we're not limited by biology. And so I have no review routine whatsoever. To answer your question, the only time really that I go into my second brain to look for something is the moment that I'm starting a project. Like the moment, that moment, like you're in a meeting and you're thinking of redesigning, let's say, the website for your business. But then there's this moment where it becomes a thing. Your boss says, okay, green light, let's do this. Or the finance person says, okay, the budget is approved. So in that instant, a project is created, right? What was just research suddenly became actionable. That is the ideal moment, right? Like you don't know what's going to happen. There's not yet any constraints. The project could look any way. It could take any form, take any path. That is the one point of leverage where you can determine everything that will happen later. And that is the moment you want to go into your second brain. And now you have all the considerations and constraints of the project. You know what it is, the timeline, the budget, the criteria for success. That is the moment to go in, do a few searches, find just a handful of existing notes, draw on that past thinking that you've done on how to redesign websites. And you're starting at the starting line of the race, like with the race halfway finished, rather than trying to start from scratch. That moment of project inception is the moment to do retrieval.
In a way, your note taking is just in time, right? You don't do that in case you need it in the future. You do it because you need it right now.
Exactly. This is the big shift we're going through like in business in general. Like we all grew up in a just in case world. All the advice everyone gave us: go to school, get good grades. Why? Just in case. Have a good, college application. Why? Just in case. Get a great job. Just in case. Everything is like preparing for some future that we're promised will arrive. Now we live in a world of just total chaos and uncertainty. You don't know what's going to, look at the pandemic, look at what's happening with supply chains, look at what's happening, with the economy. We don't know what's going to happen next week or next month or next year. And so we have to shift from a just in case world that is predicated on knowing what's going to happen to a just in time world. In a just in time world, you wait for the opportunity to arise and then you reorganize yourself to respond to that opportunity. You have to be more fluid, more flexible, more adaptive because you simply don't know the opportunities that are going to arise. But you can be much more adaptive and much more flexible if you have a second brain with all of this stuff prepared and ready to go.
There's a key idea you mentioned in the second brain, which is para. People have been asking in the comments as well. There's projects which basically has to be actionable. Can you tell us more about what para is?
Yes. So para is it's the part of my book and probably of the various techniques that I've created by far the most popular. I mean, by a long shot. And it answers what is the most common question, which is just simply, how do I organize my notes and files? Right? Like, I understand not everyone is trying to like expand their creative expression. Some people are just like, I have a lot of notes in my inbox or in my documents folder. I just want to organize them. And I have an answer for that, which is using PARA, which stands for Projects, Areas, Resources, and Archives. Everything in your life, from the past, from the future, across your work, across your personal life, across your hobbies, across everything, can be organized in just one of four categories. The projects you're working on that have like a short-term, outcome that you're working toward. The areas of responsibility that are ongoing over time. Resources, which is just everything else, potentially useful research, reference, documents that you might want to use. And then archives, which is everything from the previous three categories that is no longer actionable. The key principle here is you're not doing what most people do, which is organizing these broad categories like economics, marketing, history, psychology, which is how libraries do organization. That doesn't make sense on the individual level. You're organizing according to what's actionable, right? Projects, areas, resources. That's most actionable, less actionable, and least actionable. It's basically, since this is probably a more nerdy audience, it's an information hierarchy. As humans, we always need a hierarchy for what is most important, what is less important, what is even less important. And that's what Para does across your entire digital life, by the way. I use Para to organize Evernote, to organize Google Drive, to organize ClickUp, to organize even things like my calendar. It is truly a universal framework for your entire digital life. So even though you might use a dozen or two different software programs, I think we all do, even then, I have one system, one second brain with a parallel, identical structure across all the different platforms that I use.
And by having that, you almost know what to do immediately, even you're in the new system or context switching, right? Because like that familiarity carries through and makes you get into flow faster.
Exactly. Exactly. See, that's the thing is I have this kind of principle, which is the value is not evenly distributed. In any set of information, anywhere, the value is not evenly distributed. So if you have, let's say 100 notes and you're trying to evenly spread your attention across 100 notes, that's not a good use of your attention. The value, probably most of it, it's like the 80-20 rule, is probably in 10 or 20% of those notes. So 80 or 90% of your attention should go to 10 or 20% of your notes. It should be highly imbalanced. Well, how do you know what that 10 or 20% is? It's your projects. Your projects are like what's cooking on the stove, on the oven, right? Don't worry about the pantry or the fridge when the pasta is boiling and overflowing right in front of you. The great majority of your attention should go to what is actionable, what is active, what is moving forward, what has a deadline. Everything else is less important.
And we have a question from Bhagav. How do you connect project and areas? What happens to projects that are finished and areas that you're no longer interested in?
They get archived. So, as a reformed digital hoarder, I can never bring myself to delete anything, right? It's just, I always think, oh, there's going to be some use for this. It's going to be somehow useful in the future, which is the classic psychology of hoarding, right? Oh no, one day in 20 years, this will be useful. But the cool thing is you never need to delete anything anymore. You can just upgrade your cloud storage for a few bucks. You can buy a hard drive. You can just expand the storage, as much as you need. But there's one but. You can save as much as you want and you can keep it forever as long as it doesn't clutter your workspace, your physical workspace, your virtual workspace, and detract from your current priorities. So that's what the last A, the archives, is in Para, is it's like cold storage. It's like the basement freezer where I put things in for long-term storage so that I can access them sometime in the future if I want to. But in the meantime, they are totally out of sight, totally out of mind. They don't distract me in any way, shape, or form from what I'm trying to accomplish right now.
Tiago, do you have any parting words of wisdom, advice, or encouragement for others who are watching this video out there?
I do. And I also want to finish my story because I don't want to leave you with that, that devastating conclusion. So when I reached a point in my relationship to my medical condition that I realized I had to take ownership. I had to take control. I kept thinking someone was going to save me. Some doctor was going to give me some pill, some surgery, some magic bullet. And after seeing a dozen doctors, I just realized it's not going to happen. I have to take control. And so I was actually in a doctor's waiting room as I had this epiphany. I stood up right then, walked over to the receptionist, asked her for my complete patient record, which at that point was this big stack of papers. And I thought, I need to understand this. I took that stack home, I digitized it, scanned it all into my computer, where I could then start to work with it. I could annotate it. I could organize it. I could make connections, literal links. I could compare and contrast different advice that I had been given by different specialists. And what I ultimately arrived at, the conclusion, looking at this complete holistic picture, was that this wasn't an illness or an infection that had a cure. It was a functional condition. It was a malfunction in my body that required changes in how I took care of myself, changes to my nutrition, changes to my sleep, changes to my self-care, changes to my mental health, right? Basically, as a 22-year-old, at this point, 24, 25-year-old, I had to take better care of myself, was the revolutionary conclusion that I came to. And that's what I did. I created a protocol. I created a set of kind of simple habits to take care of my health and share those with my doctor, got their input. It was a collaborative process, of course, but that ultimately led me to a resolution, was simply taking better care of my body so that these symptoms could go away. And the reason I share the ending to that story is the answers were there. All the answers that I needed were there in the records, in the documentation. What they required of me was to take ownership of them, to take it in, change it, organize it, sort it, prioritize it, annotate it, and then put it into action. And I challenge you. I would ask you, what issue, problem, goal, situation that you're facing in your life, are the answers already around you? The answers are there. The answers are maybe in your own head. They're in your journals. They're in your family, your colleagues, your boss, your organization's wiki, or on the internet, right? For how many situations are the answers out there? It's just waiting for you. It's waiting for you to have the agency and the will and the willingness to take it in, capture it, organize it, distill it, and express it back out into the world. I think more than we realize. We have access to more answers than ever. It's just up to us to put them into practice.
Thank you so much for the encouraging words, Tiago. Everyone, please go check out Building a Second Brain anywhere online. Tiago, we are so honored to have you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlene and the team. It's been a pleasure.